and welcome to this week's episode of Bob's Live, our weekly show right here on the internet. And well, this week we're going to start a whole series. Over the next few weeks, we're going to go back to school. Right now, kids are going back to school, and also here at Bob's, we're working on completely redesigning the educational outreach section of our website. Of course, this is sort of educational outreach. Um, Also, we do our weekly blog posts, recipes, but I'm specifically working on redesigning the section of our website that's more geared toward folks coming in and taking tours, supporting schools and their kind of horticulture and botany education programs, and all of that sort of related stuff. So I think it's going to be really awesome once I get it done. But to go along with that and preparing to launch it, I thought it would be great to go back to school here on Bob's Live. So this past week, I did exactly that. I went back to my alma mater, Marshall University, to speak to their plant taxonomy professor. So let's jump right into it. It is a really interesting video. Um, I do have to kind of preface it with the fact that I really had to work on the audio. For one, I forgot, and I actually don't even have it here with me, I forgot a little adapter that I needed to be able to plug my microphone system into the camera. And because of that, I just had to use the camera's built-in mic. So I was able to go in and re-edit the audio and take out a lot of the noise, because the science building, its air conditioning system is really noisy. So I was able to clean it up a bit, but it's still kind of echoey, and the audio is not that great. But let's jump right into the video and learn a little bit about taxonomy and also an herbarium. And what is an herbarium exactly? Today I'm here at my alma mater, where we're going to go back to school and we're going to meet with a professor and learn about plant taxonomy. So let's go learn about some plants. So I'm here today with Dr. Puppo from Marshall University, and she is curator of the herbarium, which is where we're sitting right now. If you could, tell us a little bit about what an herbarium is.
Right. Well, thank you. Thank you, John, for coming to visit. Nice to meet you, everyone. So, a herbarium is a plant museum, basically. So, a lot of you might be familiar with normal museums where you go and see rocks or stuffed animals or skeletons or these kind of things. So, the way we preserve plants is a little bit different. So, plants have to be pressed flat and dried, and then we glue them to basically a cardboard with a label that has information on where that plant has been collected. And then this is how we store them. So I'm sure you will show them in a little bit how these cabinets look like and those plants look like, right? Mm-hmm. So Marshall University's herbarium is the second largest in the state of West Virginia, and we have 50,000 specimens. Most of them come from this state. And so herbarium are important because, as you can imagine, we have a big diversity here recorded in our specimens. So if you want to study a particular group of plants, you don't have to go all over and look for them. You can just come here and see what we have. And these collections span space and time. So the herbarium here is about 100 years old. And so we have collections that are 100 or older and that have been collected mostly in West Virginia, but also from other places in the US and also even other countries in the world.
Yep, so I know he was here when I was here, and he traveled a lot to South America, so I know there's some specimens here from South America.
Yes, and you cannot see them because they're behind the camera, but we have some ethnobotanical collection here, which means some things that have been made by men out of plants and that are used by men. And so the person John is mentioning, Dr. Evans, he was the director of this herbarium for 40 years, from the 70s to 2012, and he worked on how some tribes in the Amazon in Ecuador use some of those plants. And so we also have some of these things that he brought with him. I'm originally from Peru, and I also specialized in some groups of plants from the Andes. And so hopefully with time, we can also start bringing more of those here. But for now, as I said, our focus is West Virginia plants. So for the Appalachian region.
More broadly, you teach plant taxonomy. And for most of our viewers, they might not know what plant taxonomy is.
Right. The way I like to think about plant taxonomy is like a cabinet with multiple drawers, right? And so we organize things into drawers very neatly, and we know where everything goes. And so plant taxonomy is something like that. So you have all of these different species of plants, and you need a way of kind of organizing them. And so the way we organize plants is in orders and families and genera and then species. And so plant taxonomy deals with this classification in a way that makes sense. So I'm a plant taxonomist. That's one of the things I do. I specialize in particular groups of plants. One of them is in the Andes. Another one is in the Mediterranean region. And so what we do is basically we look at these species and try to classify them. We also identify new species and describe new species to science. We also provide identification keys that people can use to differentiate different species in the wild, for example. And why is this important? Well, if you think about medicinal plants, right? How do you know what species is medicinal and another one might be toxic? And so you need people that can properly identify those plants so we can use for different things, right? And this gets especially tricky in very similar species. Everybody knows what an apple and an orange is, and they can differentiate them, right? But knowing perhaps which variety of apple it is, or what kind of different species of roses, or whatever you can think of, it's a very special job. And so that's why we tend to focus on very particular groups. So we can develop this expertise because we know those species and how they look like and how to differentiate them. And so it's also very applied work, right? It's not only theoretical, but how can we talk about diversity if we don't know how many species we have, for example? Or how do we know what plants can we use or consume if we don't know which species we have, right? Or which are safe to eat or not. So.
All right. Is there any particular research that you're working on right now?
Well, I work in different kinds of research. So as I said, one of my focus is plant taxonomy with these two particular groups of plants. And sometimes I get sent plants from these groups to identify. I got some collected in Bolivia a couple of months ago that are sitting in my office waiting for me to look at them. But some of the other things I do, I also have a molecular lab. So I have a room right next door that is my lab. And so I extract DNA out of plants and kind of try to rebuild, if you wish, kind of the genealogy of the species. So what species had a common ancestor and how do these species differentiate in time. And so we do that with DNA. And you actually can extract DNA out of these museum samples as well. And so that's one of the projects I have. Another thing I started kind of recently, and I'm trying to develop here at Marshall, is I'm using DNA to understand what plants are used by solitary bees. And I'm not interested in the bees per se, don't get me wrong, I love the bees, but I'm a plant person. And so there are, a lot of you may be familiar with honeybees, right? And how you can put your nests, and they will form their colonies, right? And they will go and get their own food. But did you know there are actually hundreds of species of bees that do not form colonies? They are solitary bees, and they're wild. And so a lot of them, the female will construct her own nest, lay their eggs, and provide food for the bee babies, right? And each female will do this without having a queen and the whole colony system. So we have about 300 to 500 species of wild bees here in this area. And because they're solitary, they're kind of hard to study. And so we don't really know what plants they're using. And these bees provide free pollination services. They tend to specialize in particular groups of plants. They prefer each bee will prefer different kind of plants. And so one of the things I do is, for example, I can collect the pollen out of the bee body, and I will use that pollen to extract the DNA from the pollen and then match it to the plants where they're coming from. And that allows me to know what kind of plants are visited or are being visited by these bees. I have variations of this kind of study with a couple of different bees. I work with ones that are sunflower specialists. And so that's the ones that we collect the pollen from their bodies. I work with another ones that are alfalfa leaf cutters. Have you ever heard about leaf cutter bees?
Yes.
So they're the cutest thing ever. If you can find a video online, search for it. So these bees cut little circles of the leaves to make their nests, and their nests look like little straw-like. And so these bees will lay an egg in these nests they construct out of leaf cutouts. They put a provision that is a mix of nectar and pollen for the egg when it hatches, the larva has food. And they do this for each egg and each cell in their nest. And so what I do is I take that food out of the nest and do the same process of extracting the DNA and trying to see what plants they're gathering for this provision and also for constructing their nest. So there are just a couple of examples of the kind of research we do in the lab. I do have a master's student working exclusively with herbarium material. And so he's looking at a particular group of species that is called the rosids, that includes several different species. A lot of them are major components of our West Virginia forest. Oaks, walnuts, all of the big trees are in this group. And so what he's doing is he's taking all of the herbarium material for those plants, making a list of the species we have for the state, where they are distributed, and then he's putting those in a map. And so he's looking into where the hotspots of diversity are for these species in our state, and in that way we can inform conservation actions. So which areas of our state are more diverse and therefore should be prioritized in conservation. And we have a poster outside that you can see afterwards. So that's another example of the kind of research we do in my lab here.
All right. If people were interested in learning more about the programs here, like maybe they're a student that might be interested in attending Marshall, how can they find out more information?
So we have a master's program here at Marshall. It's very good, if you mind my saying. It's a very good master's program. It's a 2-year program. You can do some research with one of our faculty here in the department. You can apply for graduate teaching assistant position. If you get one of those, your tuition will be covered for the 2 years of grad school, and you will get a stipend, a monthly stipend. Visit Marshall website, the Biological Sciences Department, and then we have information of our graduate programs. I can also give you my website so you can put it in there if people want to know more about my research.
Yep, so I'll put that in the show notes for this episode.
Yeah, thank you. We have people here with many different specialties in the Marshall Biological Sciences Department. We have people working with plant ecology, we have neuroscientists, paleontologists, human biologists, herpetology, you name it. It's a great school.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for coming.
All right, so that is part 1 of my visit to Marshall. So next week, we're actually going to take a guided tour of the herbarium and check out some of the awesome stuff that they have there. Because it's actually more than just plant samples. For example, how do you store fruit? A sample of, say, little berries off of ginkgo biloba, or nuts, or different things like that. And then they also have samples of, they're not exactly plants, but fungi, algae, and different sort of related organisms. And they also have a plant fossil collection there. So we're going to check all of that out next week. But this week, I thought I kind of dug through my office here because a lot of what I learned in plant taxonomy I use pretty regularly here at Bob's. Um, for example, last year, uh, one of our customers had some weeds that were popping up in their plants, and we were trying to figure out if the contamination happened here at Bob's or if it happened at their location or somewhere else. So they sent me some pictures of the plants. I broke out one of my textbooks from plant taxonomy. So this is Flora of West Virginia. Um, I worked through, came up with what I thought the plant was based off of looking at the pictures. And then I basically walked out around the greenhouse where those plants were being grown to see if I could find any possible source of contamination. And it turned out later that it was a species of plant that we don't even have in this area. So we do have species of that particular type of plant, but not the exact plant. So it wasn't us. um, Also have this textbook from the course, Vascular Plant Taxonomy. And it's kind of funny. I had the class 17 years ago. So it was fall of 2005 when I was at Marshall taking plant taxonomy. But hey, it says up here at the top, it's the updated version, which I just noticed because of the green screen. That's invisible, but yeah, that's kind of funny. Yeah, copyright date's 1998, I believe. And then I also have, which it's green because I was like, hey, plants, and because I'm in front of a green screen, it's invisible. But I have my field notes from plant taxonomy because a big part of taking plant taxonomy in college is going out and collecting plant samples and then pressing them and identifying them and basically learning what the plants are. So a big part of it when I had the course was being able to identify common plants here in West Virginia. So I've actually got some of them right here in the pocket. We would be out in the field collecting samples on field trips, and Dr. Evans, the professor, would hand out a slip of paper this big, and we would be standing in a tree or something, and he would go, okay, what's that? And you would have to write down, let's see, I think it's the family, the genus, species if you could, then the common name, and something about it, I think. So yeah, this one it was a slippery elm. But yeah, he would normally do 5 of those per class. So here's one I got 16 out of 21. So not a perfect score, but yeah, that was something that we would do on field trips. But in this notebook, I've got the location of where I collected stuff. I've got a lot of stuff that'll be invisible, but I have like maps of where I collected stuff. So this was a map of Marshall's campus, and I just drew an outline of where I went and what we collected. Um, so yeah, that's the field notes. And something else that I have, and it actually still has plants in it. I've had it kind of leaning up behind my door because I did a project with this probably 5 or 6 years ago at this point, and it's been here in my office ever since, just leaning up behind the door, and that is my plant press. So I built this while I was at Marshall to press plant samples, and basically it's two sets of wooden slats. And what you do is you take some cardboard, and then the best thing to use is actually newspaper. Um, but I've just used copy paper as a blotter. And you just put your plant samples in between it. And then put it all together, and then I have some rope that I use as straps to strap it down really tight and squeeze it. And then you just set it in a warm area, like over top of, say, a vent in your house, like an air conditioning vent, and that will over time dry out the samples. Now, something that she's going to talk about next week during the tour is whenever they bring samples into the herbarium, they have to make sure that they're sterilized, because you don't want any fungus or any insects or little critters that might eat the plant samples. You don't want them to get into the herbarium, because then it could just spread through all the samples. And, it would be bad if a little critter ate a sample that's over 100 years old. So something that they do is they store the samples that are going into the herbarium. They treat them in a freezer, basically, and that kills any pathogens. And then I believe they also treat them with like a chemical treatment to kind of sterilize the sample. If you're collecting samples like for your own use, you probably don't need to do that. But if you have a chest freezer and you want to frame your samples and kind of have them where you can view them long term, it might not hurt to, stick them in the chest freezer for a while. In fact, she's getting a chest freezer for the plant taxonomy classroom where they can kind of treat samples that aren't exactly going into the herbarium, but they need to study them. So they need to be sterilized somewhat. And yeah, I'm starting to ramble, so we'll dig into the herbarium a little bit deeper next week, now that you know what an herbarium is. Before I head out this week, of course, we need to take a look at the weather. Our weather's looking pretty nice this week. I mean, compared to previous weeks. Right now it's 84 outside. And yeah, the rest of this week we're looking at temperatures in the 80s. There is a chance of rain on Friday. And actually, the forecast just updated just a few minutes ago while I was in the middle of the live stream. It was showing more sunny on Thursday and Saturday and Sunday, but now it's showing a little bit more cloudy. But I'm seeing a lot less rain in the forecast, and that's great if you're trying to get out in the garden and harvest your crops and also prepare for fall gardening. I know I've got turnips that I want to plant and some other fall crops that I want to get in the ground. So yeah, the weather is looking great as far as getting out in the garden uh, later on this week and also into the weekend. It's going to be kind of toasty on Saturday or on Sunday if those temperatures uh, stay true, but you know, it's still August. And of course, before I head out, you can find us on social media at Bob's Market. So you can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and then we're also over on TikTok now. So you can check us out there. And the absolute last thing that I want to do today is take a look at our almost said fall. It's getting into the fall, but I want to take a look at our poinsettia crop. It's been a while since we looked at it, and right now this week we're starting to transplant poinsettias for Christmas. So back at the end of June, early July, around that time frame, we were looking at poinsettia cuttings, and now they've grown to a point where they're being transplanted so they can grow into their finished size. So I'm going to end the show this evening with looking at a poinsettia update. And, well, that is it for this week. So until next time, keep growing. Hey, Merry Christmas. Today I'm here at our Uptown greenhouse where some of the first transplanted poinsettias of the season are heading out to their final location where they're going to grow into a finished size. So the last time we saw these was all the way back in June when they were little cuttings that were being stuck. So let's go see where they're going to now. So the last time we saw these poinsettias, they were just being stuck in a little starter plug of soil to grow roots on them. Now that plug is large enough that it has been transplanted into a finished container. And I'm going to get a little bit closer to the camera, but if I kind of pull the leaves back, you can actually see that original plug of soil down in the middle there. So these have quite a little ways to go. Of course, you know, obviously it's the end of August, and these won't be ready until right around Thanksgiving and toward the beginning part of December. But yeah, this is the current progress of this year's poinsettia crop. And of course, this is just one size container. We're going to be doing a bunch of different sizes and a bunch of different colors. And right now they're all green because they haven't reached a stage, and also the day length hasn't got short enough yet that their foliage has started to change. So this one, we only know what it's going to look like from the label, and it is Christmas Wish Pink. So this is going to have a light red, pinkish color to it. Of course, we'll check back again as we head into the fall and ultimately into the holiday season as these continue to mature and start to get color.